Good morning, colleagues. It is now 10 o'clock and I think we shall begin. I would like to begin by welcoming everyone to this meeting of the Assets and Procurement Committee here at New Shire Hall and everyone watching via YouTube. The County Council allows filming and photography at its public meetings, so please feel free to take pictures and use social media during the meeting. Can I ask, though, that everyone present turns their mobile phones to silent or vibrate whilst the meeting is taking place. Please be aware that this meeting is being live streamed and that a recording of the meeting will be available to view on the County Council's website. There is no fire alarm test scheduled for today, so if the alarm sounds, please leave by the nearest marked fire exit and assemble in the car park. The closest fire escape is through the middle doors on my left. Right, item number 1. Apologies for absence and declarations of interest. Would the Democratic Services Officer report any apologies for absence, please?
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillors Bowden, Bywater, Connor, Dupre and MacDonald. We have Councillor Criswell substituting for Councillor Bywater and Councillor Van de Ven substituting for Councillor Dupre.
Joining shortly.
Oh, sorry, and late arrival, Councillor Machini.
Thank you. Does any member wish to declare any disposable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest? Item number 2, minutes and action log. We are being asked to approve the minutes of the committee meeting held on 16 January 2024 as an accurate record. If any committee member wants to raise a question on the accuracy of the minutes only. So I see no objections. I will take the minutes as carried unanimously. Thank you. Attached to the minutes is an action log. A number of updates were circulated by email yesterday. Do officers have any further updates? Do members have any questions? We are therefore asked to note the action log. Item number 3. Petitions and public questions. We have no petitions or public questions. In which case we'll move on to item number 4, procurement of water and waste services. Can I ask Sarah Wilkinson, Carbon and Energy Manager, to present this report, which is on page 17 of your agenda pack.
Thank you and good morning, everybody. So this report considers options for procurement of mains water and wastewater services for the council's sites, which is those assets where the council is the one paying the water bills, for when our current contract expires in October. Due to the tight regulations in this market, there is a little difference in price between suppliers, so quality of service is the greater differentiator. The cost that we pay is mostly dependent, of course, on the volume of water that we use. Having assessed a range of options, my recommendation is that we enter into a new contract under the new ESPO framework, which offers a fully compliant procurement route with Wave, who are also our current supplier. This option would give us a supplier with a good track record and is the most straightforward to administer, which also meets all our other requirements. Thank you.
Members, do you have any questions for Sarah? Could I remind members that the appendix to this report is confidential and we will need to move into confidential session if you have detailed questions relating to the appendix. Does anyone have any questions? Councillor Van de Ven.
Can I ask a very simple layperson's question relating to wastewater and I guess relating to the new age of climate changes here and water infiltration and that sort of thing. I'm interested in the confidence around the state of wastewater infrastructure which we connect to and any new measures that are needed to be confident about its performance going forward. I hope that's appropriate to ask.
Okay, so with this contract, we'll be contracting with a retailer of water and wastewater services. So what that retailer would be providing is the meter reading, billing and administrative services for those contracts. The physical supplies of water through the pipes and wastewater being taken away doesn't change, and you can't choose who that's through. So that would be the wholesale company, which is in our case, either Anglian Water or Cambridge Water, is the same no matter which supplier we go to. So it's unaffected by this decision today. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Goldsack.
Not a question, but I'm assuming we can move into comments and debate. Sarah, just very quickly, I want to congratulate you on presenting this. I thought the document was clear, concise, and I thought the confidential attachment did exactly what it said it should do. So thank you for making it very clear. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak? In which case, yes, I agree. Thank you very much, Sarah. It's an excellent report. So the report recommendations are A, to approve the use of the new ESPO framework, number 1008_23, reference 1181, for water, wastewater and ancillary services to enter into a contract for those services effective from the date after the council's current contract expires. And B, delegate authority for awarding and executing a contract for the provision of mains water and wastewater services starting 27 October 2024 for a period of up to 3 years and extension periods if required, to the Executive Director, Place and Sustainability in consultation with the Chair and the Vice Chair of the Assets and Procurement Committee. Do I see any objections to this? In which case I will take that as carried. Thank you. Item number 5, the Land and Property Strategy. Can I ask Chris Ramsbottom, Service Director for Property, to present this report, which is on page 31 of your agenda pack?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, committee. I bring the Land and Property Strategy 2024-29 document to committee for approval today. The strategy aligns with the Council's strategic framework and will contribute to the vision and ambitions within it, as well as maximising the synergies with other enabling strategies of the Council. And this is detailed within pages 39 and 40 of the agenda pack. The existing land and property portfolio is noted within pages 41 and 42, and the strategic fit and how the strategy will align with the decision-making governance of the Council is shown in diagrams on page 43. A strategic property board will oversee the delivery of the strategy, and an operational corporate landlord stakeholder group will be constituted to ensure alignment from both an operational and strategic perspective. The key drivers of change and the purpose of the strategy are detailed on pages 44 and 45 and inform how they are linked within the principles. The strategy has 4 key guiding principles which will drive the policy and delivery of the portfolio to ensure it's fit for purpose, safe, compliant, environmentally sustainable and efficient for the needs of the Council and our communities. The strategy explains what we will do and what we will achieve by applying the principles to our decision making. Those principles being suitable and effective, place shaping, sustainable and greener, and working closely with communities and partners. The overarching corporate landlord approach to delivery is detailed within pages 55 and 56 of the pack. And the 7 delivery functions of that model are 1, measuring performance and delivery, asset challenge process, maintaining the assets, working with partners, listening to communities, decarbonisation of assets and carbon net zero, and enabling service planning, which are all detailed within pages 57 and 65 of the pack. Included as Appendix B is a strategy delivery plan with timescales. This strategy has been widely consulted within service areas, at DMT meetings, within the corporate leadership team, and there has been 2 specific member workshops. So lastly, item 5.1 of the report concludes that the opportunities to strategically use our land and property to support the council vision and ambitions are significant, and the strategy will provide the corporate framework to enable our portfolio to be suitable and effective, place shaping, sustainable and greener, and to enable closer working with communities and partners. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Before we move on to the questions and debates, I have a minor amendment to the recommendation, which was submitted to Democratic Services within the deadlines and circulated to committee. My amendment is to add the wording, subject to any minor amendments by the Executive Director of Finance and Resources in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of the Assets and Procurement Committee after approve the Land and Property Strategy 2024 to 29. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Ray. Would anyone like to discuss this, or shall we vote on the amendment? Could we have a show of hands to indicate support for the amendment? Thank you. Members, do you have any questions for Chris? Councillor Goldsack.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. Chris, another good report. I'm going to comment on something that I didn't find in the report and ask for reasons why. Most of Cambridgeshire is some of the flattest in the UK, yet we've got very little, if any, mention of any wind technology coming on and use on our land. I've been an advocate for some while that of solar PVs into the farming estate, and I think that's a good thing. And I know in the report that you're looking at that and doing that where you can. But dirt, dust, and noise is an issue that affects solar PVs in a rural farm environment, but it doesn't affect wind. And with the changes of at government level in the last year or so, encouraging this more, I would have hoped to have seen more of a push for this in our rural estate in particular. I welcome your comments on that, please.
Thank you for the question. It's simply an oversight. That'll be one of the items that we look for and look at in terms of going forward. And within the document, it does mention other environmental ways of looking at the farm estate in particular in terms of going forward. The fact that wind wasn't predominantly mentioned in there is not an oversight in as much as we're not looking at that. So it will be one that we look at and as an option going forward.
So if I can, sorry, I didn't mean to leave my mic on, apologies. If I could come back on that. So how will we in this committee see it, or will that be taken care of in the amendment to your proposal as a minor amendment through this? Do you see what I mean? If we've not got anything in the land strategy at the moment on use of wind as a technology in this area, how will we see that coming forward?
The comment on page 51, one of the boxes does show, I'll read the word, and it says, innovate the rural farm estate to consider commercial and environmental opportunities, for example, BNG solar farm, diversification in product water management. That's what I was referring to in terms of it just simply an omission in that box of putting wind as an option that we'd be looking at. So if that needs an amendment and an addition, then I'm more than happy to do so.
Through you, Chair, I think it's significant enough of an area for us to have a solid comment on it. It's a huge opportunity for us and a huge opportunity for our farm tenants and our farm estates to do something about. So I think it would warrant a little bit more than it being in a box that we know that you're going to look at. And but you know, that's positive. But I think we could benefit from that, please.
Thank you, Councillor Goldsack. It is something that we will discuss as under the minor amendments remit for this strategy. And that is precisely why I brought the amendment, so that things that were highlighted in the debate could be fed back into the strategy. Councillor Beckett.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I think mine feeds slightly off Councillor Goldsack's there, which is under 3.10 in the report. It outlines what the strategy will provide a framework to do. Now, I do notice slightly absently from that is the kind of the revenue of our assets and making sure that the strategy will provide a basis of how we can improve the revenue. There is in there about generating capital receipts and about reducing revenue impacts, but there isn't actually in that kind of set of bullet points anything about revenue generation. I noticed the framework itself actually does provide lots of examples of that, but I do wonder whether that was just kind of omitted from 3.10 and was one of the core kind of parts of the strategy, or whether that's something that we need to add in the future and make sure it is a core part of the strategy, that revenue generation, because there are so many means that we can use our assets for.
Again, it is in the, as you suggest in the report, we will happy to add it in as an amendment.
Councillor Nettinger.
Thank you. My comment is following on from the comments from Councillor Goldsack about wind energy. I am really pleased to hear that Councillor Goldsack is so positive about the potential opportunities for wind energy. It's my view that a change in our policy on that would need to come back to members and would need some wider discussion and shouldn't just be dealt with by something being slotted in without further consultation with the wider council, because I think it would be quite a significant change to our policy, and we would need to think about how we consult with local communities about that and how we would make sure that local communities benefited from any potential in that area. There's been no opportunity to do anything about wind energy in this country onshore for a very long time. I think if that were to change, it's something, the way in which the council would approach that is something that we'd need to discuss, not just in this committee, but also with the Environment Committee and probably with the Strategy and Resources Committee, because it would be an overarching, it would be a significant change to policy. So I think just slotting something in wouldn't necessarily be the right way to approach that. Thank you.
I think that's an excellent comment. I mean, I think perhaps the way forward is to suggest, in alignment with the County Council's broader policies on environmental technologies and so forth, so that it becomes more general and allows the changes in County Council policy as they go along to correspond to the strategy. So we'll find a wording around that so that the comments in this committee are not dictating the broader County Council policy without further debate. Any other councillor Count?
Thank you, Chair. I've got a number of questions, stroke comments on the actual paper, but if I can just follow on the new area of discussion first. I think it'd be really useful to have a wider debate on the use of energy projects encompassing all the options that are available. So that'd be solar, wind, anaerobic digesters, etc. Because I think a lot of people have a lot of different views. I'll make mine clear on anaerobic digesters. I think they're great when they use the byproduct of a crop. So we have one example near us where they have a potato treatment plant, and the biodigester deals with the waste from the exercise, which is great. However, I think other examples where crops are grown on soil and then our roads are clogged up for that, instead of using that for food stuff, I think they're bad. I really do. In examples of solar and wind, in the examples of solar, I wouldn't put solar on grade 1 agricultural land, whereas other examples I would. So I think it'd be great to have actually that put in front of the appropriate committees as a wider piece, so that we can all come to, or so that you can come to a unified stance on this, whatever that might be. But it'd be good to have a wider debate on that. Returning to the paper in hand, I found there was a lot that was good in here, and there were areas that I did get a look at it beforehand. I mentioned some things. I think we could have been clear on what are protected assets. I think there are certain things that should have a higher degree of protection than the norm. So I'll give you an example. Shire Hall, which is still going through at the moment. One of the reasons that we went for a leasehold option when the previous administration was in charge was that so we could ensure that the mound was used for public purposes. We would always have that control. An outright sale would not deliver the same levels of control that we had there. So there's certain things I would argue that the protected characteristics of an area of high need, you would never ever denigrate a library service or a local high-class employment there. So those kind of things I think we could have been a little bit stronger on in the document, and it may be something that you wish to or not pick up as part of any minor amendments. In terms of the overarching document, the key drivers for change were financial, amongst other things, asset improvement, disposal capital receipts. However, the savings, there is a savings requirement which is referred to in the overarching paper, and it certainly simply says that they're in the business plan. It doesn't give us a figure of what those savings requirements are. So it's difficult for us to match that number up against how this would perform against it. In fact, it's unable to give us a way of comparing that requirement against the strategy output. I note from previous works that at the moment our tolerance for remote working, in fact, the fact of remote working, which is good in certain cases, has led to only 25% occupancy of our buildings, which is not covered in this paper. And I can't help but think, if that's correct, why wasn't there an earlier effort to trim that down? In terms of the remaining estate, we therefore can't see what the end game is, because we don't have the financial requirement laid out, of where we want to be in terms of occupancy and what is an efficient use of our estate. It says quite broad terms like we will have an efficient estate. It doesn't define what an efficient estate management is. Is it that the workers need to be within X miles of where they're delivering a service, or is it that any buildings we have need to have a minimum of X% occupancy rate? So it might be useful as a follow-up, as an action plan, to actually have some metrics measured against how we're going to look at it. The buildings that we saw at full council in terms of actually delivering, which it predates this, delivering on the financial commitments, we're not sure how that fits into the overarching strategy, just the simple fact that they were decided before this came, and they seem financially opportunistic in advance of this. And I have no problem with that, because I looked at the list, I didn't have any problem with what was on the list. But actually, we need, as an action, to develop from this to know when a list will come forward to us and the actions will come forward to us for how we're going to achieve the things that are in here. On facilities management, there's a lot of big words about how you're going to improve facilities management, being excellent, etc. I don't see how that works out, considering that you made a major cut to your facilities management budget in the budget that you just passed in February. So hopefully you can take those on board, Chair. Thank you.
Would any of the officers like to respond to any of that specifically?
Just in response of the figures in the budget quoted, those were referring to the accommodation improvement programme that went through the business and finance plan at full council. So those savings were £400,000 this coming year, 1.7 of revenue, with the intention of £11 million of capital receipts. Above and beyond that is the plan, and that is part of the council's change programme. So the detail of that and decisions around that will come back through committee separately. This is a strategy above that, if that makes any sense.
In terms, I think the point as discussed about sustainable technologies is something that there is probably always an appetite to discuss, and I think there would be a value, because it is a kind of changing situation, and what we have is we have projects coming to us without which progress along with time. So I'll take that away and talk to officers and see if there is a format by which that could be something could happen, but it's not straightforward as to what that would be, because I don't think any debate without significant amount of work and knowledge is going to be a useful or productive thing. But let's look at how that could be developed. Councillor Michael Hudson.
I'm not sure if that's a promotion. Just to put a bit more context around page 40, just sticking with the issue of type of sustainable energy, does make reference to the alignment with other strategies, and clearly one of those strategies is climate change and environment strategy, and what we're setting out here is that a part of the decision making around any of our land or property needs to consider that sustainability. What the best route is will be considered alongside such things as effectiveness and suitability. Picking up the point on the measurements of that, I'll come back to that. As well as working closely with communities. So actually the delivery vehicle for that sustainability is completely agnostic, if you like, in this strategy. It's the recognition that we must pay attention to the climate change strategy. And I think that's where that debate needs to sit. I think that there's then the need just to probably explain that the whole picture is that the sitting below this will have the asset management plan, as well as policies around disposal, acquisition, maintenance, and therein will lie the assessment of what is, for example, efficiency and effectiveness, and Councillor Counts points in terms of occupancy, its actual cost actually will be measured through that and would be part of that pillar. But again, we can happily share that because it's then part of the criteria of the weighting. So as we bring forward the initial proposals, and there will be further across the next few years, which is why savings isn't specifically mentioned in terms of a target, because it's the strategy, and this will grow, I'm sure, as the council addresses its medium-term financial strategy, will be in the decision-making process. Each of the buildings that come forward, this is how it scores in terms of its effectiveness, its sustainability, its working with communities and place shaping. So that will be part of the next stage in terms of the decision making. You will have that set against these pillars, and in making the decisions then around individual land or property, that will be where then that will be drawn out. And I think as part of that, things such as protection, working closer with communities, or the impact of the removal of a building or the adding of a building in terms of service impact would also be drawn out. So it's putting the framework to which then the decisions will comply with, if that makes sense.
And presumably in terms of buildings currently at 25% occupancy, we've gone through a period of COVID, which massively changed working patterns, and then has taken a while to settle back in to see what the ultimate patterns are. And similarly with Shire Hall has moved. So it feels that having a breathing space before this property strategy was developed seems sensible, as it's more established working patterns now that things have gone back to normal. Councillor Gough.
Yes. Okay. So one comment, substantial. So it's picking up on Councillor Counts' comment, which I agree with, really, that there's a lot of sort of laudable strategic objectives here. But what goes along with it is kind of measurement. And I think, Michael, you said almost without actually saying it, that there will be a suite of kind of KPIs to support this strategy, which I think is absolutely necessary. So I'd just like to sort of close the circle on that, just to make sure that we're clear that that's one of the next steps in this strategy, is to get a set of measures to see how we're doing against these objectives. And then Chair and Vice Chair, I've got some work for you in terms of the detail on page 42, which is the portfolio, which is it's percentage of what? Is that percentage of value, percentage of land area? It's not clear. So that would be, I think, useful to sort of clarify what that pie chart is indicating. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Beckett.
Follows nicely along from what I was about to actually slightly question there, which it says our total asset value is 764 million on the previous page. And then on page 40, it lists 35% as being operational access, including highways. As chair of highways, it'd be remiss of me not to question whether that does actually include our highways asset, that I believe is actually several billion if you total it up. And obviously the amount of land that we have within our highways asset, particularly the sides and verges, adds up probably to more than the county farm estate. So I was just wondering whether that is actually, you know, factored into this and considered as part of one of our assets.
Chris?
No, the scope of this is any depots as building assets, but the pavement, roadways, etc. are not included within that.
Can I come back on that then? Say, would it be worth us adding that in as an asset? Because particularly our verges and other things, they really do occupy a lot of land, and it might be worth considering that as part of the strategy, and whether that there are opportunities around that as well as issues.
So if I can just come back on that. So we do in this touch on some of what you might describe as the vacant surplus land, which touches on some of those aspects, but there's a difference between the footways, the fence to fence, as I describe it, the footways and highways, which we're excluding from this strategy. We're saying specifically that the highways infrastructure in terms of its roads and footpaths are exempt from this strategy. That's the highway strategy. But there are some surplus areas of small strips, triangles that are caught within this strategy.
Councillor Criswell.
Thank you. Yes. I'm looking at page 65 of 158, enabling our service areas to maximise service delivery. And it talks of property will review, appraise and challenge assets, and the plans will then feed into asset challenge process. But for me, this is very top down. I would prefer us to see it from a service perspective. What does service delivery look like? And therefore, what properties do they need? Rather than how does service delivery fit in with the properties we happen to have. So what I would like to see is what service delivery looks like under decentralisation. So do we have a service delivery strategy? And then how does that inform our property decisions? Because if we need to sell a property and buy a property in order to serve our communities and our service areas better, then I feel that should be the approach rather than just appraising what we've got and saying how do services fit in with that. For me, that's the wrong way around. So I just wonder how we're being informed by future service delivery. If somebody could please address that. Thank you.
What you just said is exactly the process we'll be carrying out. What we need to do is work with our service areas to understand their service transformation going forward, what their services are changing, what their needs are, and then look at the properties and how that reflects into property need. It's not trying to fit existing services into existing buildings. We need to sit down with our service areas and understand where they're developing, how they're developing, and as an impact, as an outcome, the property needs that they need. So, and that will then dictate whether any of our property needs are still fit for purpose for that service delivery, or if it's another building we need to build or acquire, etc., to fit that need. So it's very much focused on service delivery.
Councillor Criswell.
Just come back. So it would be helpful if that was made clearer in the paper that this is very service led rather than asset led. I think that'd be helpful. Thank you.
I completely agree with the sentiments. I think that's why the second of the four pillars, the second to the working closer with our communities and partners and place shaping are there. So the first part is assessing what we've got and making that sustainable. The second part is what is needed and fits with that locality area-based planning, and has the bottom up and top down driving of that. So I think the strategy covers that. If we've not been as explicit in kind of saying that, then we can have a look at the wordings, but it is absolutely looking at what's the need for the community that then drives this this decision-making process.
Councillor Count.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to comment on one of the responses I got earlier and the implications of that. So we've got basically an overarching strategy that we look at service delivery and an asset, and then it's scored against a matrix, and then we make a decision on what to do. And I understand from the comment earlier that scoring matrix will be weighted and shared with us. Now, it seems to me that this overarching strategy can go in any direction you like as to what your preferences are, depending on the scoring matrix and the weighting. Therefore, it doesn't feel to me like it should be an officer decision to share with us what the weighting is. It feels to us, me, it should be either a joint workshop where we agree the weighting, or the officers present the weighting in a committee paper and a scoring matrix for us to either amend, approve, or comment. So I'd like to just get some clarity on that and see which direction we're going to do this scoring matrix so that members get an input. Thank you.
Yeah, I think from here, that's the next phase, and what we want to bring to the June committee, and then start to roll that out from decision making after that. So completely agree.
Councillor Goldsack.
Thank you for allowing me back in for a second question. It's on a different subject to my previous one. Looking at page 39 of 94, we've got the very asset value of 764 million with everything around it. The next slide after that indicates the percentage. Now, I assumed that was the percentage that each area made of the 764 million. So if that's correct, then we are holding a land value of our asset base of farms at around 6.7k per acre. My question is in two parts, and it may have to come back in a future report, which I think may be one of my requests. And that is, we must, as a council, be looking at constant ownership of land relative to local plans and future developments, in which case you can see in excess of a 10-fold increase in that rate, that value of that land, should it be acceptable for future planning and disposal. And disposal is mentioned quite a few times in the document, but there doesn't seem to be a financial element of that. I was wondering whether we could actually see, and it would be a separate paper to be brought forward probably to this committee, a potential value analysis of future development land. What I'm talking about here is each strategy touches on the next one. So if you're in an area where a new school is required, that new school could move to a periphery of a village, for example, onto county land, which could then springboard the opportunity for further of that county land to be developed for building land. And the uplift in that building land has probably gone from 8 to 10k an acre, not 6.7, but I can accept that, from 8 to 10k an acre, depending on the area of Cambridgeshire, probably up to £300,000 an acre for building land. So it's a quite significant asset-based uplift for the county, and it should have a massive effect on us in terms of moving forward for the revenue gaps that that are faced by future councils.
Excuse me, just to clarify the percentage, those percentages are the percentage in numbers, so the overall number of assets. So, for example, the libraries represent 5% in number of the overall number of assets we hold. Not related to value.
Not the value of them as a percentage.
Yes.
Okay, well, I think you've probably learned there that we need more qualification on the description of these, but.
Would anybody else like to speak?
Sorry, I didn't get a response. Sorry. So I'll paraphrase my question and my dialogue. Thank you for the qualification on the percentage. Whilst I may have that incorrect, my point is that we have land that could be future asset value increase because of disposal for the right reasons. Right? I'm not saying get rid of the farms estate. I'm a huge fan of the farms estate, but there has to be a constant churn of that. Right? Under the previous administration, we bought a farm because it was the right thing and the right strategic value to do that. But actually, that was to replenish some of the ones that we'd lost or that we'd moved on. What I'm asking for, and I think this committee is the right committee to see that, is can we have a paper, it probably have to be confidential, but can we have a paper at some point that shows us the potential land value of such a situation?
Yeah, I think just first point of clarity is it's tenanted value that's shown, where that is, because some of the farms land is, and we've got a paper later on to consider in closed session. And therefore part of this is assessing the whole estate in terms of its ability to place shape, which includes some of the things that you're saying, Councillor Gilbert. It's exactly that thing that then the asset plan will start to flesh out and have a 5-year programme. So the team are currently doing that, hence why we've got the paper going forward, and over the last 10 years, we've had many of the rural estates come forward with such proposals, and that will continue. So it's not stifled by this paper. This paper actually puts a lot of clarity behind when we're considering whether it's sustainable for a wind or a solar farm, or whether it's for a building property, or whether it's to maintain as a tenant, but to use the land differently. So for a vertical farm, what it's saying is that through the asset management planning that follows this, that has to be part of the consideration, exactly as you just described.
Would anybody else like to speak? So the report recommendation, so we will now move, So the report recommendation as amended is to approve the land and property strategy 2024 to 29, subject to any minor amendments by the Executive Director of Finance and Resources in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of the Assets and Procurement Committee. Is everyone in support of that? Thank you. I'll take that as carried. So we'll move on to item number 6, Commercial Commissioning and Procurement Framework. Can I ask Claire Ellis, Head of Procurement and Commercial, to present this item? The report starts on page 69 of your pack.
Thank you. So good morning. The report in front of you introduces a new commissioning, commercial commissioning and contract management framework. As you know, the council has a hybrid approach to its delivery of that cycle. We have centralised procurement function and service area delivery of commissioning and contract management. This makes, we believe, the best use of the resources that are available across the council, both centrally and in service areas. However, we have a need to ensure that all elements of that cycle are delivered effectively and consistently. And the new Procurement Act also brings regulation across that cycle rather than just on procurement. So the purpose of the framework is to enable consistent and effective delivery of commissioning, procurement and contract management, viewing all of them through a commercial lens to ensure that we maximise value for money. It aims to make best use of the resources that are available across the council and the expertise that's available as well. It will also hopefully enable us to maximise the flexibilities that are coming with the new Procurement Act, so that we can use the right process for the right requirement. We intend that the delivery of the framework will be overseen by the Procurement Governance Board, and update reports will come here as part of the performance reports that we bring from procurement. It's been consulted on mainly with adults and children's commissioning, and it's also been reviewed by CLT a couple of weeks ago. You'll see that there are a number of cross-cutting themes that are throughout the framework, and the measures of success are also included as part of the framework. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Claire. Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Ambrose-Smith.
Thank you, Claire. Good report. Enjoyed reading it, would you believe? Page 80, you mentioned roles. A small graph there showing roles. Within those roles, there's a position of data stroke business intelligence, and you have that at the beginning of the journey, but you do not have it in the review column. Should that be shown in the review column? You've got this data and so forth, the intelligence. Should you not be reviewing how successful that was, how accurate that was? Should that not be there as well?
I'm happy to make that amendment. Yes, you're right. It needs to appear.
Thank you very much. On another, probably just a statement, really. In the report, you're looking at measuring the supplier and the supplier failings, spending a lot of time on that, which is good. But there's very little, if anything, about the county's failings. How are you measuring that? Are you satisfied that you are looking at that as well? And also, as a final point, you mentioned that a lot is talked about for value for money, which is acceptable, which is understandable, but it should be more about community satisfaction with the dealings with the county, because they are partners. There's nothing coming back with community satisfaction. There we are. That's all I've got to comment on, really.
Thank you. Can I just clarify what you mean by council failings? Is that on that process?
Yes,
point?
within that process. I know there are in parts of it you do look, like any successful team, you must understand one of those roles and strengths and so forth. But you're going to fail. You're going to fail. Life is, you're going to fail in some places. So I'm just saying, how are you measuring that and what you're doing with that?
Okay,
Because I cannot see anything in there in the risks where you're actually measuring that at all. Tell me if I'm wrong. I don't mind being told.
No, that's fine. We have a lessons learned process, but perhaps that's not embedded as clearly as it ought to be within the framework. And I'm happy to update the framework with that information. In terms of value for money and customer satisfaction, I think that comes from the hybrid approach that we have. So obviously, we work very closely with commissioners in service areas who develop their specifications around what customers, what the community needs in terms of the service we deliver. And then part of the contract management process will be, often there are performance indicators embedded in contracts that refer back to, what do service users think of this service, those kinds of performance indicators. So they're embedded throughout the cycle as part of that approach.
Thank you.
Councillor Gough.
Yeah, okay. So I think this is very much in the right direction, this strategy of engagement of the broad set of officers and expertise around the process continually in a way to get that maximum input into the procurement process. So I'm very much in favour of the direction of travel. Just a couple of comments, picking up a bit on what Councillor Ambrose Smith was alluding to. On page 80, which is this chart on the roles, I think that's good in the sense that it illustrates who's involved. What's not clear, and which I think might be a useful addition, is to describe exactly what their role is in that process. Is their role to input into the decision? Is it they actually have the decision? Do they have to approve a decision? So, you'll be familiar with the RAPID framework. I think the RAPID framework here would provide a lot of clarity to the process. And then the second point, which is related to that, is it looks like this is a process which, and this is more of a question than a statement, but that each one of these 4 steps actually has a gate, a decision gate going from one to the other, in which case it would be useful to formalize that as a decision gate in the process rather than leave it kind of as all circles going around all the time in the process. Thank you.
Thank you. There are formal decision gates in terms of as we move from commissioning and so the plan phase into the securing services phase, there is a procurement plan that is signed off by the relevant chief officer and depending on the value, me. And then as we move through towards the end of that phase, there is also a ward report that is signed off as relevant as well. But in terms of the other elements of that circle, there aren't gates as such unless they appear within the service area. So I know that service area DMTs review commissioning plans and contract management, etc. So they're more kind of dispersed across the council rather than formal gates in this process.
Yeah, so I think where there are formal gates, it would be good to note those, and simply the formal gates sort of help you in terms of actually defining where the role changes from one state to another. So you might want to give a bit of thought to how you operationalize this in a way where, because the key thing here is to make sure that everyone understands what their role is at various stages of the process. And at the moment, when I look at that, if I were someone in the finance team, I would see I'm involved in it, but I'm not kind of sure what my specific role or obligation is in that process. And I think we could usefully clarify that.
Thank you. Councillor Count.
Thank you, Chair. It's a good document to read. It's heading in the right direction, and I thought that pretty much everything was nailed down to a certain extent. But my concerns are really what Councillor Goff has picked up on is how do you operationalise this? It's a huge document. There's some training embedded. There's some expectation on training. But once everybody's got their tick box done, I've been on the training. How do we look at as the years go by? Did somebody actually pay attention? Were there forms? Were there check boxes to ensure that this all happened? Now I know that that we're taking a hybrid approach. I think a hybrid approach is necessary, but it's not actually defined really what we mean by a hybrid approach. It's the council will be moving towards a fluid integration of roles in a sensible, cohesive way. But at the end of the day, the hybrid approach, procurement, understanding how procurement works, commercialisation, understanding how to get the best deal, service delivery, being very caring about what it is that the end result. You need to encompass all of those three. But at the end of the day, you have to have some way of coming to a decision on each individual one. How do you know in one if the commercial aspect is the most important, as opposed to how does one overrule the other in certain situations? So it's not clear on that element, and we can't always just have a lovely world where everything's fluffy and we'll come to the right decision. I couldn't see the control mechanism for how we come to that ultimate decision when we don't always row in exactly the same direction. In terms of the procurement process, I thought it's somewhere in here, in terms of the review, there should be some dip testing by people outside of that process, so that the procurement team should actually at some point in time take somebody else's piece of work, have a little look at it and see how it measured up against all of this. And that seemed to be here. All reviews were done internally, unless I missed something. In terms of exit strategy, absolutely vital to have that in there. What I didn't see in here is the kind of diarised calendar instructions for the end of term, natural or exit. So, for example, we have seen at the County Council over a number of years procurement items coming urgently into the committee, because when they were signed off 5 years ago, nobody put in the diary for 3.5 years' time to start the next 1.5 year procurement contract. So we need something as that exit strategy to have a mechanism, an automatic mechanism, because people move on, so that somebody knows that a procurement is coming up for in an appropriate timeline for that. Under the contract management, those contracts over £100,000 have a named contract manager. I just want to seek reassurance that those under £100,000, there is always an individual identifiable for placing a contract, not a department. Okay, because when, as we heard, things do go wrong, somebody has to have gone through this and they need to be able to show that they've done all the work. You can never hold a department to account. You can hold individuals to account. So that was the ones underneath 100,000. They don't necessarily need to be a contract manager to take that through the life. That somebody needs to be held to account if there's something wrong with it. Thank you.
Claire?
Thank you. If I just pick up the last couple of points you made in terms of the individuals responsible for contracts. When a contract's added to the contract register, there's always an individual placed against that contract. So it might be the individual responsible for managing the contract, or as you say, in lower value contracts, it may be an individual representing the team that's responsible for that contract, but there always is an individual. And in terms of the the comments you were making about contract term and exit strategies, etc. As part of the work related to this and related to the implementation of the Procurement Act, we are looking at whether we can expand our current e-tendering system, which is focused on procurement, into an e-tendering and contract management system, which would then start to flag to contract managers, you have a year to go before your contract end date, etc. So that would flag to contract managers and back to us that those contracts are coming to an end. We do have that mechanism in place via the contract register now, but that we think that might be a more robust way of doing that. Thank you.
And in terms of dip testing by somebody outside the team, please.
We can certainly look to embed that, and I can as part of the action plan, I can speak to the commercial team about how we might look to do that. Thank you.
Councillor Beckett.
Thank you very much. And yeah, just to follow up on Councillor Count's point there about knowing when our contracts expire, I was amazed when we came into administration, just within, particularly in the highways, how many of those we just didn't know when they were coming up or have that register them. So I really welcome the work that's been done to get that full register of contracts. As we do have that, there is obviously always more work to be done, but it is really useful and good work. So thank you on that part. I also wanted to come back on kind of Councillor Gough's point as well. I think your page number is slightly different from me, Councillor Gough, but on page 78, that kind of diagram that shows the roles of people in it, that's, I mean, when we talk about things that a picture tells 1,000 words, that one is incredibly useful to be able to see the roles and responsibilities of everyone on there. And it is really good. I know Councillor Ambrose Smith was talking about the kind of lessons learned. It's good to see those lessons learned in the review phase in there. It probably would be good to flesh that out slightly more of how we learn those lessons and make sure that we have a really good process to be able to do that. And particular reference back to the other options at the beginning of the contract. I know in most of our procurement reports now, there's multiple different options given, including the do nothing option. And in the review phase, it would be very good to go back to those reports and say, okay, how did the option that we take stack up against the other options that were given? The other part for me there, in the roles, what to me is lacking in it might be in other documents, but I think it'd be worth including it within this table, is the role of members in all of that, and really fleshing out how we feed into the process and what our particular roles are in that, and particularly where those gateways are. I know we're obviously often involved in some of the kind of the specification and those outcomes at the beginning, but it'd be really good to kind of have that involved in the table so as everybody can be clear looking at the table what their roles and responsibilities are and where it feeds in. Thank you.
Michael.
Yeah, absolutely. Support that, and power of hindsight's a wonderful thing. I think that definitely we can update the chart on page 30, page 80, but also add in that gateway aspect, because the critical point in the practice here is that the commissioning decision in effect is what comes to the relevant committee to then move on to the procurement within a boundary to then award. So I think that is something that it would be good to add into both that roles, but then into the theme at page 83 and onwards, in terms of just clarifying, which picks up the earlier points. Forgive me, I can't remember which councillor raised it, clarity of the roles and responsibilities as well. So I think it's an oversight there that we'll add in.
Thanks. Can I just come back there quickly to say, I think as well, it's that commissioning stage that goes via our committees, but nearly all of those delegations are in consultation with chair and vice chair. So it'd be really good to flesh out what the role of chair and vice chair is there, and where that consultation is simply a question or an agreement, or exactly how that works.
Yeah, and again, it's the complexity of the paper, which does have a number of links to our procedure rules, and of course, each individual paper that comes forward is slightly different depending on the scale and the complexity of contract, the length, and that gives it the kind of boundaries that if it's within those boundaries, it's then consulting with the chair and vice chair that it's within this. Are we happy to to sign off. If not, it just comes back to committee. So that is within the procedural, but I think there's more we could do to draw out in the framework that specificity of the role of the councillor. So I think that's good. Thank you.
Councillor van der Ven.
Thanks. Thank you for the question, Alex. I think in addition, we need to consider timing and when this goes to our partner committees. If this comes in at a late stage, and it feels like a very big deal, and there are serious questions to ask from a different perspective, things can really be problematic. And so how to fit in that awareness of what's coming down the track is really important. And I think for those committees, it isn't just chair and vice chair, but the committee itself will really care about these decisions. Thanks.
So Claire, I'll just come in on this one, and I really liked what Councillor Count said earlier on about operationalise, which is the next stage of this. And there is a line there at 3.6 on page 84, which talks about utilising the commercial pipeline to inform savings and investment opportunities and future business planning decisions. That pipeline, which is the key thing to continue investing in and improving, has to include within that the timetable to ensure that we're bringing decisions far earlier, monitoring through things such as the waiver process. And I know certainly the chief executive and the monitoring officer have been very vocal in terms of expectations around this. So whilst there's a single line there that maybe doesn't in its sense capture the full essence of what you just said, I think it is there, and we can have another look at that wording in terms of enforcing that, because I totally agree, and this will take time to embed, but it's where we should be at. Completely agree.
Claire?
Yeah, I was just going to pick up the same point, really, that we are developing our approach to that pipeline work. And one of the key purposes of the framework is to get more onto the front foot. So by effectively and in a consistent way delivering commissioning, we are able to then understand the pipeline early enough that all of those other bits fall into place. And papers, as you say, come to committee early enough that you feel like you can make decisions with proper consideration of the options coming forward. So sorry, yeah, I was just going to pick that pipeline approach up. Thank you.
Councillor Count.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the actual recommendations, last paper, this paper, in consultation with the chair, vice chair. I know we've covered this at the last committee, and I'm very happy with the action log that's gone against how that will be handled in the future. It's going to the Constitution and Ethics. I've had discussions with Stephen Moyer and the monitoring officer, and they are in total agreement, and you can cast me down with stones if you find out it's any difference, that if there are recommendations for amendments delegations, it should always be in consultation with the chair and vice chair. And I know it's not written in the Constitution yet, so it surprised me that it wasn't, that you needed to go through the extra steps that you did today, because it obviously hasn't been embedded through the officer structure. But whether that needs further work or whether it needs to go through the Constitution and Ethics, I don't know, but it should be automatic when the papers are written now. But I think that it's really useful for the committee. There's been a really good discussion on 2 papers now about how we're able to influence things. But what would normally happen next would it would be going off into the ether. There would be the officers would write up the amendments, you would sign them off, and everybody's happy, etc. And we won't see them again. It's really valuable to know what we've achieved today, and I, for one, would love to see these come back by email with just the highlighted sections. I don't want to read the whole document again. This is what you've done today. And I think if we could regularize that, where there are delegations, so it comes back, so we can see what happened, it'd be really useful. It just gives the committee a sense of, look, we achieved something, as opposed to did that really make it into the document or not feeling? Thank you.
Totally support that, and you'll see in the other decisions that yes, it does say referring to the chair and vice chair, but when we picked up the strategy, I think that's a learning point going forward, regardless of whether the conversation, and I do know the conversation's been had with the chief executive. So we'll pick that up and commit to email out the changes, and then through correspondence to sign this off. There'll also be further reports coming back in June and September on the last item and on this item. And in fact, the action log picked up in terms of the update in relation to the risk assessment, which is tied into this. So we'll also be giving further updates in terms of the implementation of these strategies. But I'd be quite happy, Chair, to agree to that request.
Yep, I think that seems like a very sensible action. The previous item didn't have the specification to review, which this one does, which is why the amendment was submitted. Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor van der Ven.
Sorry, since we're getting into the detail of this pipeline and processes, we've really taken a lot of trouble to make sure that the spokes meeting. Sorry. I just wanted to insert the spokes meeting into that advance awareness, because certainly in adults and health, we're really putting a lot of effort into that. And I think in all committees, that ensures that all the groups in the council are well informed.
Councillor Ray.
I think what comes over to me is the importance of defining how each of these documents, the one we've just debated and the one we're currently talking about, who they're for, who they're directed at, what their purpose is, and how they fit in to the overall series of documents, which do what Councillor Count quite rightly says, quantitatively hold the processes that we do to proper assessment and account. And those are, I think, important aspects to put into these documents. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak? In which case, where are we? Members, we're invited to review and approve the commercial commissioning and procurement framework. Is everybody happy with that? We'll take that as reviewed and approved. Thank you very much, Claire. So item number 7, the committee agenda plan and appointments to outside bodies. Would the Democratic Services Officer update us on any changes to the published report?
I have no specific changes other than those we've already touched upon that will be coming back to the June or September committees.
Members, we're asked to note the agenda plan. Noted. Item number 8, exclusion of press and public. In order to discuss the following items, we need to move the meeting into private session, excluding the press and public. Members, do you agree with the proposal to move into private session? Thank you. So the report to resolve the press and public be excluded from the meeting on the grounds the agenda contains exempt information under paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 as amended, and that it would not be in the public interest for this information to be disclosed. Information related to the financial or business affairs of any particular person, including the authority holding that information. As this is the final item, members are in support of that. As this is the final item on the public item on the agenda, I would like to express my thanks to those members of the